before we get started, I just want you to think about this question, and in a few minutes I might go to some of the folks online to see what their answer is to it. But you know, obviously each of you will have some thoughts in your mind about what your current team meeting is like, and there's probably one or two things you think that you might be able to improve. So if you can think about what one of those things might be, in a few minutes I'm just going to go around the group and I'll ask various people what their thoughts might be. So the meeting is basically about the 4 must-have team meeting agenda items, and I must admit, our IT director, Alan Hill, when he saw the title for the meeting, thought it was the most boring topic he could possibly think of. And I guess Alan's worked in a lot of big companies where meetings have become a little bit like that, a little bit boring. And you know, he thought there was more of a negative topic than a positive one. But I have to say that in our experience, and I'm talking about myself and my business partner, Martin West, they're probably the most enlightening aspect of any team that you can find. And when we first started consulting on execution, you know, we used to run workshops and we were always very unclear about you know, whether what we were actually doing was coming to fruition, whether people were actually taking any action on the things we were doing. And so we decided just to attend team meetings. And I think since that time, I've lost count of how many. It would be over 1,000 meetings I've attended, from frontline teams to senior management teams. And it always fascinates me just how much information you can glean just from watching a team meeting. So so you understand where we're coming from with this. Most of you online, I think, understand that you know, both Westy and I have been focused most of our professional time together just on helping people close the execution gap, and you know, the gap between what your plan says should happen, what actually happens in practice. And really, we try and narrow it down to just 3 very specific points, making sure you've got your people focused on the right things, trying to get some visibility on performance, because we know once you get visibility on what people are doing and how they're progressing, accountability comes with that. And then the final one is to try and build some kind of strong meeting discipline. So obviously this short webinar is just about that last point, trying to build a meeting discipline, and specifically on the 4 topics that we have learned over time are probably the key ones that we think most teams need to focus on. So I'm just going to come back to my point, and if you've got a comment to make here, please just let me know, and I'll open up your mic. At the moment you're all on mute, but let's just go. If anyone's got a comment on the one thing that you think that you can improve your team meeting with, what would that thing be? Sean, I'm just going to go to you. You're obviously a sales manager. What are the one thing that you think, if you could improve your meeting, what would that be?
Well, one of the things would be to be gaining more feedback or more interaction from the staff during a meeting.
Sure. At the moment, they just sit mainly and listen to you, do they? Or
some you know, more willing to be more forward than others, but I think sometimes, certainly if it's a long meeting, I can get dragged into that trap where you're talking to them rather than having a conversation with them.
Sure,
such, yeah.
Sure. Okay, good. Anita, I'm not sure if you're online. I'm just going to open your mic. Any thoughts? I'm not sure I can hear Anita, so let me just try.
Mark, can you hear me?
Yes, I can now. Yep, please go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. What my answer to that question is I'm a coach, so I'm used to asking people on a one-on-one basis, after they've decided what needs to be done, what does that mean in terms of practical action? And but it's hard to do that in meetings because when people are talking, it's not kind of socially acceptable to say, well, what does that actually mean you'll do? And so often sometimes I stay silent when people are saying, well, what we need to do is X, Y, Z. and then once that's been said, they move on to the next person, but there isn't any sort of practical direction on what X, Y, Z means in the real world.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. And actually, one of the 4 items, when I get to them, is actually directed at that point. Anita, I might just get you to switch off your little hand up signal. But if anyone else, we've had a few people joining us while we've started. I'll just say again, there's a little hand button on the right of your dashboard there. If you want to ask a question at any time, please just raise your hand and I'll put you online and you can ask the question or make a comment. We don't have a whole lot of people online at the moment, so it's quite easy to open up the mics. What I might do is, I mean, they're 2 fairly typical comments that you might hear. I'm just going to show you a list of things that most managers or even team members would say are the things that frustrate the most, or the things that they kind of would like to improve. And there's some obvious things. There are people turning up late, and no clear agenda about what's actually going to happen. Often people not paying attention or maybe not being engaged. It's often we've seen, particularly today with conference calls and video technology, sometimes that technology is not all that reliable, and that causes some issues. Obviously, no clear ownership of tasks assigned, and I think one of the last ones is that big topics are sometimes left unanswered or are not discussed. I'm just going to go to Anita. Anita, have you got your hand up again? Have you got a quick question?
No, I don't have another question. No.
All right, no worries.
Does my hand look like it's up?
It does, so maybe I'll try it. There it is, it's gone. Good. Okay, so all those points there really, to me, point to one thing, and that is really establishing a discipline with your team that is consistent. And I don't want to go too much into the detail of this because I really want to focus on the 4 topics. But to me, when you're building a discipline around this, you need to try and make sure that you've got the right people in the room. So if it is a team meeting, then everyone really should be there. And as best you can, you should try and encourage them to be on time. And then the second part is to try and make sure you have their full attention. Now, one of the things that I think we underestimate is, as leaders of these teams, the team meeting to me is probably the key part where you can, or the key opportunity for you to have some impact on your team. Some of you online would know, my background prior to doing this some 15 years ago was in professional sport. And, I used to coach basketball professionally. And to me, anytime I had a chance to sit with my team and get their attention, I wanted to make sure I made the biggest impact I could. So I would agonize over exactly what I was going to say, how I was going to say it, what topics I wanted to cover, what sort of interaction I wanted from them. And I've often felt that, at least in the business world, this is not always done to its greatest effect. So before we begin and get to the 4 points and the 4 key items that I think should be on your agenda, I just want to cover a couple of key lessons which we apply generally across execution. But in this particular case, I want to apply them directly to the team meeting. And, the first one is trying to make sure that you keep things very simple and very straightforward, and not cluttering up the agenda with a whole bunch of stuff. Trying to make sure that you stay focused on what are the most important things and take all the other stuff off the table. If you need to, organize another one-on-one meeting or a secondary follow-up. But when it comes to a team meeting, I think you've got to keep it fairly straightforward and not complicated in any way. The second lesson is to be absolutely black and white and crystal clear. And I think Anita raised a point then about people leaving a meeting being unclear about what the next step is. And when I get into these 4 points, one of those is directly related to that. I think if people aren't sure what's going to happen next, you could almost say that the meeting's a failure. So, we need to look for black and white clarity, not only what people are going to do, but also on the actual data or results of how well that team is performing. And then the last thing is, and they kind of related a little bit to the first two lessons, and that is you really want to focus your discussion just on those things that are going to have the highest impact or give you the highest value on those things you need to focus on. So, you know, if you're a sales team, then you really need to focus on those things that are going to drive sales. If you're an administrative team, you need to focus on those things that are going to make sure that you deliver the best administrative service you can. So it's not a matter of bringing everything to the table. It's a matter of focusing on those things that are critically important. Now, as we go through this, here are the 4 things, and when you look at them, they may look pretty simple, straightforward, perhaps even in terms of what my business partner, Alan Hill, says, quite boring. But to me, the team progress, individual progress, roadblocks, and next steps are the 4 most important agenda items that you need to cover. But it's almost how you cover them that becomes the critical thing. So I'm going to go through each of these points very quickly. And to do that, what I'm going to do is actually give you 3 or 4 questions that you should ask. Now, I just want to pause here before I go through each of these 4 items. To me, questions are probably the most powerful management tool that you have. And the way you ask the questions, asking as many questions as you can, asking them in the right way, to me is critical. It's critical for a number of reasons, and I guess I'm talking a little bit here to Sean, who just said when we asked for some feedback that just getting engagement was one of his challenges. Once you ask a question, a couple of things happen. First of all, you cause people to think. You're actually getting people to put forward their thoughts and ideas. The second thing is, once they come up with those ideas, if something happens with them, they basically own the solution or own the idea. So that for a start starts to build some level of engagement. I think the second thing is, as a manager, you really want to tap into the intelligence of the people in your team. So often what we've done to test managers, and this may be a good challenge for each of you, is when you run your next meeting, see if you can run it just by asking questions. You know, where are we now? What are the things we need to work on? How might that work if we did that? What about if we did this? Just about anything you can think of can be put in the form of a question. So to help you through these 4 points, what I've done, rather than say do this and do that, I've actually suggested 3 or 4 questions that you might ask related directly to each of the 4 items that I put on that agenda. So the first one, team progress. And I think, you know, obviously a lot of people, surprisingly I guess, will have a meeting and not really know exactly where the team is at any point in time. And for us, that's almost, you know, it's ludicrous to think that a team could come together and not really know what the scoreboard says or how they're progressing. So getting, you know, the hard numbers, very clear black and white numbers on exactly where a team is really the first thing, and to try and get those out is pivotal. So let me just show you what I mean by that. There's 2 examples on the screen here, one for a sales team and another one for administration team. And what you're looking at is actual examples of teams we work with where they have very specific targets, and at each time they meet, they are looking first and foremost in their meetings at these targets and exactly where they are at any point in time. So you're getting very specific, hard data. There's no gray. There's no, oh, I think we're about this, or I'm not quite sure where we are now, but last week we were there. You're getting the actual hard numbers. Now, this is critical because I think it's very hard to have a meeting about things if you're not really sure where you are to begin with. Now, some teams, maybe some of you guys online do this quite well, but But in our view, it won't matter what sort of a team it is, whether it's a HR team or a sales team or administration team. You can have 3 or 4 very specific measures for that team and make sure every meeting is focused on just trying to get the actual current result on those. Now, once you've got that up, I think it's really critical to open up to the team and ask, look, what's working for us now and what's not? Obviously, each time you're going to have results that you think are good and results perhaps not quite so good. But to try and get that out early is a good thing, and maybe even to ask questions like, are we actually focused on the right things here? There's clearly a course of action you've taken with your team and certain things that you're trying to get done. It doesn't hurt at the start of each meeting. Are we still focused on the right things? Is there anything we need to do differently? Now, in doing this, really what you're doing is 2 things. You're giving them the opportunity to perhaps challenge what they're doing, or alternatively, you're actually confirming that what you are doing is right. But if you don't ask that question, you'll never know. And it's always, in my mind, a key question for discussion, that you shouldn't be just satisfied with where you are, that you should try and challenge the norm by asking questions like this. So that's team progress, first one. Let me go to the second one, individual progress. And again, this is very similar. And what I want to do is just quickly digress here. You'll notice the first comment here is about hard numbers and hard facts. At the heart of our discipline, and I know those that have worked with us before, Sean, and I know Robin's on the line, and Alan, they will know that at the heart of our discipline is a thing that we call, a 90-day contract or a 90-day plan. And in our view, each person in every team, regardless, from CEO right down to the front line, should be very clear about what their 3 or 4 outcomes are over a 90-day period and be measured specifically on those outcomes. So what you're seeing here is an example of what a 90-day contract might look like. And you can see that there's 3 specific targets there, one on new customers, one on customer service, and one on putting together an IT systems proposal. But they have very specific numbers attached to them. When we first introduced this, one of the reasons we introduced it was to bring a real focus to the team meeting. And we gradually realized that it was something that very few people had in companies, where they were very clear about what their top 3 outcomes might be over a 90-day period. And it sort of became the center of most of our teaching discipline. Again, guys, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to raise your hand as we go along. So, getting the numbers and the hard facts on something, you don't have to have a 90-day contract or a 90-day plan, as we call it, but you really need to know, each team member needs to know precisely what's expected of them. It needs to be measured, and you need to be able to ask questions around that. The three further questions here, I really like to know what the biggest challenge of each member of the team is. Usually there's something that's really either bugging someone or they're finding difficulty with, and they may not like to give it up in a team meeting, but I think over time, the more times you ask that question, the better answers you're going to get. I always think it's good to ask, what can we do to help? Mainly because that's a team type question, and it may be just not something you can help with. It may be something that someone else in the team can help with. And then the final point here is, what are your top 3 this week? Now, this is something we've been experimenting with here with our company and with some of our client companies over the last couple of weeks. And I actually think there's a lot of value in asking everyone in a team meeting what their top 3 are for the week. The 3 things that are going to have the greatest impact for the team that they need to deliver on. What that allows them to do is strip away a whole heap of stuff. If you ask someone in a meeting, what do they need to do this week? They're probably going to give you 20 things. But really, what you really want to do as a leader is try and focus them down to the top 3, the ones that are going to have the greatest impact on performance. So let's go to the third one, roadblocks. And, if you're trying to get something done, or you have a strategy or a project plan, or a team that's just working through certain processes or systems to try and accomplish things, it's a question that needs to be asked in every meeting. What is actually stopping us, or what is slowing down? How can we deal with this? What action do we need to take? Now, as a leader, you might need to really press this. We sat in a meeting in the United States some months ago, and the manager there was manager of a fairly large department, and he really pressed his team hard to ask them exactly what it was that was stopping them or what was challenging them. The thing about that was, once he had a list of things, he spent the next 24 hours just dealing with those things and would not rest until they were all either fixed or dealt with in some way. To me, that's great managing. That's a really good leadership lesson there, that a manager is really trying to create an environment where his team can actually get on with the job and get things done. So you might just think about, with your teams, asking that question on Roadblocks, because if they're not visible and you're not asking, they're continually going to be sitting in the background there, perhaps inhibiting your progress and making it difficult for your team to actually get the stuff done you want them to get done. So let's go to the last one, and I think this relates a little bit to Anita's comment. For me, the very last step in a meeting is to quickly go around each person in the room and confirm with the team a couple of things. You know, what their top 3 might be for the week, what key actions are going to need to be taken on Roadblocks, and then finally, perhaps, is there anything else, you know, we need to deal with? I always like that final question of just, is there anything else? Because then it's like a catch-all for those things that may not have come up during the meeting. Now, just on this last one, as I said before, a lot of our consulting has been to sit in meetings and to perhaps provide feedback to the managers on how they've run the meeting and how they might be able to do it a little bit better. But the big test for me, and we've done this quite often, is before people leave the meeting to actually ask them what their top 3 things are for the week, or what are their next steps. If they can't answer that with any degree of clarity, you realize there's always something that's not quite right in the meeting. To me, when a meeting's over, there should be no doubt in the minds of any of the participants exactly what's going to happen next, either with the team or for them personally. So it's short and it's sharp, but to me, having watched this for some time, they're the 4 things that I think you need to include really in any team meeting agenda that's going to happen weekly or fortnightly. Now, what I'd like to do just before we end is I think some of you may be aware of this, but what I'd like to do is just show you how we deal with this with our online application. You know, visibility of all these things to us is pivotal to executing strategy effectively. If you can't see stuff, it usually doesn't get done. So the application, and I know Sean's company uses this quite extensively, so he's not seeing anything new here. But if you look at that application, what you're seeing is really 3 of the 4 items that I just spoke about. You're seeing the progress of the team at the very top there, where it says the 90-day goals, exactly how they're progressing and where they're at. It actually shows you exactly what each individual person and how they're progressing. And it also shows you the roadblocks that are affecting that team. And the way in which the application is set up is that you can move pretty much from team to team and see exactly the same information for each team. And if you wanted to drill down and see what anyone was doing over a 90-day period, you could quite easily click on where you see contract on that screen there, and you could bring up their 90-day contract and see quite quickly excuse me, what any member of the team was doing. So it's pretty straightforward. I didn't want to make this a long webinar. I just wanted to focus on a few key points, and I'd be interested in your feedback either via email if you're going to try this, how it went, and you know, what success you had, what trouble you had, because obviously every team's a little different, and not every team fits the mold. But to me, if you're not covering these points off in your meeting, then you're probably in some way not getting the job done exactly as it should be done. Now, before we go, I still would like, if there's any questions or anyone would like to add any comments, please just raise your hand. I see Anita, you got your hand up again. I'll just put you on mic. Just go ahead, Anita.
Yeah, Mark, I really like the model, and I was just wondering how it would be utilised with goals. For example, building trust within a team. Say that was the goal of a manager, or he knew that was a problem. How would you deal with that in this model?
Yeah, I guess, you know, I've tried to take offline the idea a little bit of, you know, the team culture and personalities and things like that. In fact, you know, often what we've found, though, is once you be very clear about things and very specific and very direct about what the team is trying to achieve, often you'll remove a lot of the issues that usually face most teams. Most issues of those things arise when people are very unclear about what's required of them, and there's a lot of grey about what the purpose of the team is and what people are doing. That's not to say that just by using this agenda you're going to solve all your personality problems. That's just not going to happen. But I think if you cover these 4 points, you're going to be in a much better position with your team to actually progress things than if you don't cover them. I tell you one other thing it will do, though, Anita, is it will definitely show up if there are any underperformers and if there are any recalcitrants, so to speak, in your team, because this actually makes very clear exactly what people are accountable for. Okay, thanks, Anita. Any other questions at all from anyone on the line? Okay. Thanks, guys, for attending. I'm going to make sure I try and contact you either by email or directly by phone. And as I said, I will send you 2 things. I'll send you a quick video of this webinar, so if you want to share it with your team, you can. And in addition to that, I'll send you an article that we wrote about 3 weeks ago, where we observed a really, really good team meeting, and just might be interesting for you to have a look at that too. So since I don't see anybody raising their hand or providing any questions, thanks very much for your attendance, and I'll be in touch with you in the next 24 hours via email or on the phone. Thanks again.